do a sound check.
All right. Do you want me to recap what we've already done so that it's recorded, or should we just move forward? Do you want to do that or do, okay.
I'd like to do a quick recap. We realized that we did not have audio and apologize for that. It's been all fixed, so we should be good. As part of agenda item number 3, the August 2nd minutes were set aside for a correction, for an edit to vote number 9 that was missing a second. We corrected that and that was approved, as was the consent agenda. After that point, we introduced the nomination for the Adult Education Director, and there's a motion by Member Bowden, second by Ms. Whitlow, and was approved 8-1. And we are now moving on to agenda item number 5, which is public input.
Thank you.
My name is Matt Jaded. I live on Montello Street. I have 2 children in Lewiston Public Schools. My 12-year-old will be starting middle school, and my 9-year-old will be in Geiger. I believe that's the introduction I'm supposed to provide. I provided the committee with a packet. I will provide the chair with a PDF afterwards. Long and short, and I've discussed this with my children, Lewiston Public Schools should follow federal and state CDC and Department of Education public health recommendations. Page 2. For context, where we are today in terms of cases being reported daily in this nation is the same as roughly November 12th of 2020, which was shortly before we reached our peak in January of some of the highest caseloads that we had seen in our nation. We are on the same rate of infection as we were then. Page 3. Cases are climbing in our state. If you look at what the last month of data looks like, it looks like the beginning of an exponential curve. Exponential is a word that is often overused. There were exponentially more people there than last week. Exponential means it's a runaway process. It's the same kind of things we see in nuclear explosions. That means that even in our little state where it feels like everything is fine, case numbers are going up on the same curve as the rest of the nation. And they're developing most rapidly amongst the young. Data on page 3 is from the main CDC. Page 4, we are at 78% ICU capacity. I do not know the numbers for pediatric ICU beds in this state. I'll bet money it's small. Mississippi is at 100% pediatric ICU right now. Kids who need ICU care in Mississippi can't get it. Does the committee, this is a rhetorical question. I was a professor for many years, so it's an unfair rhetorical question, but does this committee believe that ignoring CDC guidance will lower our ICU numbers? And I ask you if reactive policies are a commitment on the part of Lewiston Public Schools to sacrificing health and lives, because a policy that says we will wait and see is a reactive policy. A policy that says we will do pooled testing twice a week with all of our students is a proactive policy. Page 5. Mississippi 8th grader dies with COVID hours after Governor Reeves downplays child cases. You can look this up. You will say, you're picking one instance. The district decided in June that it would allow students and educators to bring face masks to school, but would not require them. In their first partial week, they then had to scramble as 76 students tested positive, 11 educators with 400 plus students in quarantine. And band director says, please pray for the school and for the family. And I would really, really like to have more than my personal faith to go on as we go into the school year. It feels to me like asking everyone to wear a mask in a structured and organized way is a low bar at this point. The PPE is available. We are accustomed to it. It protects all members of our community. I don't know which of you is going to call the families of the sick children, but there will be. Will it be the people who voted no, or will it fall to superintendent? You might as well decide that now, because someone will have to make the phone calls. If Lewiston Public Schools, my last slide here, essentially slide 6, if Lewiston Public Schools chooses not to follow federal and state guidance regarding public health on behalf of parents, students, staff, and our community, then I would ask, what thresholds for infection, hospitalization, and death amongst our children and the staff of Lewiston Public Schools will cause the superintendent and the school committee to reconsider their choice to ignore basic public health recommendations? Because there will be infection and there will be hospitalization and there might or might not be death, and we pray there isn't. But do you know the numbers? And if you don't, you're wading into this unaware and unprepared. And you are the people who decide it. So I close. I think LPS should follow the guidance. Their recommendations, because the Maine CDC is non-regulatory, they can't issue law. So their recommendations are not, we think you should. Their recommendations mean this is what our best evidence and science for where we're at says we should be to protect our community. Please require masks. Please do what you can in terms of distancing. If we haven't invested in ventilation in the schools, I'm sorry I haven't followed, I don't know. But I know that we can say, please wear masks and require. Thank you for your time. This is something I feel strongly about. I've written the board, and as I said to Superintendent Longways, I haven't given you a lot of quarter, nor has anyone else, because unfortunately it's become a polarized issue when public health, in my opinion, should not be.
Thank you. We have one hand raised online.
Lisa, you are all set to share.
Thank you so much. First of all, I'd like to thank that gentleman very much for articulating so beautifully all of my sentiments as well. I did watch the August 2nd board meeting and saw that the vote was close regarding masking for everyone at the school being optional rather than mandatory, and was very disappointed and knew that if nothing changed by this point, that I would at least have to speak at this board meeting. Shortly after that board meeting, Lewiston Public, or rather Portland Public Schools and Bangor Public Schools made announcements that they would require masking. And at that time, it seemed, well, okay, they're in areas of possibly more substantial rates of infection than Androscoggin County was, but within days we caught up. And it seems to me that this is a very rapidly evolving situation. When COVID first came out, we were informed that it was primarily a concern for the elderly and immune compromised. And many people didn't worry about that so much if they weren't elderly or compromised. But then we began to realize that we all had to take part in the health and welfare of the people in our community. Well, now the unvaccinated population that is most at risk is our children. And I just can't wrap my brain around the idea that we're, as educators, not stepping up immediately and saying, okay, we must do whatever it takes to protect our children. I'm a vaccinated teacher. I'm sorry, I don't know if I introduced myself in the beginning. My name is Lisa Padillo, and I'm an elementary teacher at Montello. I'm a sixth grade ELL teacher and newcomer teacher, actually. So I apologize for that. But yeah, it's our children who are unvaccinated, and this virus seems to be really kind of sneaky, and it's going after those people right now that are unvaccinated and mutating and making changes that make it seem particularly dangerous at this time. We're also heading into a change of seasons, where last year we noted that because we were wearing masks, many of us at school, teachers and my friends and family outside of school, were astonished at how healthy they stayed through the flu season, the cold and flu season. And we all said, hey, those masks really do work, don't they? Well, now, again, we are preparing for that same threat with the addition of this virulent type of COVID virus, and we're not taking those same precautions. I think in my final statement that I'd like to make about this, that's very concerning to me, is that whether or not we're masked, students who are ill will need to stay home from school if they're ill, if they have a cold, if they have the sniffles. It seems to me that most of the people, and I could be wrong here, but it seems that most of the people who would prefer us not to have a mandatory mask requirement are those that are also the most insistent that we don't follow any other model, such as hybrid learning or remote learning, and stick to strictly in-school learning. Masking is the one thing, I take that back, one of the few things, but a very high level thing that we know works, that would help keep us all in school, in person, 100% of the, or as much of the time as possible. So I just really would like to ask that the board, any other community members, teachers, educators, anyone who feels as strongly as I do, to please stand up for the simple act and precaution of wearing a mask for our children at this time, until we see that it is no longer a threat to them or their education, our families, and our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. There's one more online.
Sue St. Hilaire, you are all set to share.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Susan St. Hilaire. I'm a teacher at Lewiston High School. I want to point out that, at the last meeting, many parents voiced that they feel that they and their children have a right to access their education and not wear masks if they choose. I want to point out that teachers and students also have a right to get their education in a room that is as safe as possible and free of the COVID virus, given the fact that most of us are in older buildings with less than adequate air circulation. I feel that that's what's making this topic so difficult. Each side feels they have rights to not have to get vaccinated and or wear a mask, and also rights to be in a classroom that is as free from the virus as possible. Because there's no option for opting out of in-person this year, it makes it even more of a volatile situation, unfortunately, because if parents and teachers want our kids to be safe of a virus spread, or if they want our kids free to not wear a mask, we have no other option to default to. I think that this is the real problem going into this year. Both sides feel like they have no choice if they feel very strongly about what they want, what they feel is the best course of action going forward. I also want to point out that parents who feel very strongly about their children masking will send their kids to school with masks and expect them to keep them on. I find it hard. I think it's going to be hard for teachers to be able to be the mask police, and I don't think they're going to be able to. And I think parents are going to feel very upset if they find that their kids are not masked and things like that. So I think we're opening ourselves up for some really big problems in that way, because they also cannot opt out and have their children access their online education like we were able to last year if they feel that strongly about having their children masked. So I just wanted to make sure that the committee recognizes that there are rights to both sides. And, we heard a lot of the rights last time about rights to not have to wear masks, but there are also rights to feel safe and as free from the COVID virus in the classroom as possible. That's all I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members, attendees online that would like to speak? Seeing none. Open up to the committee. Member Majerus Collins.
I appreciate the folks who have spoken tonight and the many folks who have reached out to the committee as a whole or to their ward representatives. I've heard from some folks who are just in Ward 3 and have just talked to me, and I'm sure that other folks in the committee have heard directly from their constituents as well. On August 2nd, I indicated, and I still believe, that that wearing a mask is no fun. I wasn't wearing one then because the CDC recommendation suggested that the community was at a point where it was safe for vaccinated people to go without a mask indoors. Circumstances have changed since August 2nd, and Androscoggin County has moved from moderate transmission to substantial transmission. And as we heard tonight, there's every reason to believe that that accelerating trend will continue. Given all of that, and given the feedback that we've heard, given the changing circumstances, and given the fact that just today, Bates College announced that everyone on their campus will be required to be masked indoors, regardless of their vaccination status, I would move that the committee suspend the rules to consider alternate proposals to adjust to a changing COVID landscape.
Is there a second to suspend the
Second.
rules? Any further discussion? Member Luke Jensen, sorry, I just totally blanked on your last name.
Been a little while. Wouldn't that constitute a motion to reconsider? And I believe only the prevailing side can make such a motion. So I think the motion is out of order.
That's not correct. This is a motion to suspend the rules to consider alternative proposals, and it's not a reconsideration of any prior motion.
If I believe it's subjective and it's up to us to make that decision, so we can make that.
It has just occurred to me during this conversation that we don't currently have a parliamentarian because that was Ms. Ray, who is no longer with us. So I'm not sure who to defer this question to. I have my Robert's rules, but this is not something that I'm very familiar with.
A point of order on that. The committee as a whole could make a ruling on the subject.
Yes, please.
If I may, there's language in the adopted recommendation that speaks to being adaptive. And so as time has unfolded, we have new information today. We'll have new information before school starts. I also wanted to say that we're prepared to be adaptive with the ed policy that the school committee approved at our August 2nd meeting.
Member Beauchamp.
Being adaptive is nice, Superintendent, but I prefer us to be proactive. May I comment on the three speakers?
Right
Right.
now, the discussion is supposed to be around suspending the rules or not.
Okay, thank you. I'll hold my,
Member Majerus Collins.
As the superintendent said, the situation continues to change. And we have, as a school committee, have a responsibility to adapt to changing circumstances. So I would encourage folks to vote yes on suspending the rules and allow us to have a more robust conversation about the circumstances that have changed since August 2nd. Not to reconsider a decision that was made on August 2nd, but instead to respond to new information with new policy.
So are we good to vote on whether or not to suspend the rules, or do we need to further the discussion that Luke brought up? If no one feels, do you want to speak on that, or?
Yeah, just kind of thinking on the spot here. I mean, I just reiterate that it does constitute a motion to reconsider. So I think that kind of falls to maybe the committee as a whole, and maybe to you as chairperson to make that decision. I believe that's how Robert's rules operates. And so, I mean, maybe I'd recommend you could maybe poll the group here and see if we think it's even an appropriate motion. And then you can make a decision at that point. But I believe as chair, it's your decision.
Well, a point of order, if the chair were to make a ruling, any member of the committee could appeal that ruling to the whole board, and ultimately the board would vote on it. So either way, if Member Jensen is insistent that the committee not vote on a motion to suspend the rules because he believes that suspending the rules constitutes reconsidering something, I couldn't imagine what, but that would ultimately be decided by the committee as a whole.
I think from my perspective, and please correct me if I'm wrong, since the motion on the table right now is to suspend the rules, that wouldn't constitute a reconsideration. But if the motion to suspend the rules passes, then what follows may constitute a reconsideration. That's how I see it, but I could be mistaken.
Yeah, Madam Chair, that's exactly how I see it too.
Okay, so we will continue with the vote to suspend the rules, and we will start with Ward 5.
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
7,
Yes.
City Council.
No.
I vote no. Ward 1,
No.
2,
No.
3,
Yes.
4,
No.
Motion fails 3 to 5.
Thank
1, 2, 3, 4,
4 to 5.
4 to 5. Apologies.
Agenda item number 6 is to receive a presentation on Lewiston Public Schools Educational Equity Action Statement and potential vote to adopt. And you want to introduce them? Okay.
Yeah, if I could, I would just want to chime in and say that we have been working on an equity statement for Lewiston Public Schools for multiple years. And coming out of events in our city that prompted a much bigger following and a much more involved process. I'm very pleased to introduce Aisha Hall, who is our equity student, social emotional learning and equity coordinator. Resource coordinator, I apologize. Aisha also served in our community on a number of committees, but Aisha will come up to share some information. And also with her, we have Fatuma Hassan, who has been involved in many things from activating things in our community to supporting students, to supporting parents, to connect to schools, but also work in the community around equity on top of it also. We have both of them here this evening to share their thoughts.
Good evening. So, hi, I was introduced first, but what I would like to do is allow Fatuma to talk about the history and some of the things that we're doing with City Spirit LA. And after she presents, I'll kind of give a little timeline of how we have collaborated over the year in almost 8 months that I've been working as the SEL and Equity Resource Coordinator. Thank you.
Thank you, Aisha. Hi, good evening. Fatuma Hussein with the Immigrant Resource Center of Maine. And I am from Somalia originally, and a mother of 8 children, 4 boys, 4 girls. I know that's crazy. All raising here, and 6 of them were born in the state of Maine. When I came to Lewiston, we had 3 Somali families back in 2001. February 4th, 2001, precisely. and it was a very snowy day. And since then, we've got a lot of migration that has happened in the city of Lewiston, and there's a lot of diversity that's going on. And so I wanted to give a very quick, how much time do we have?
We had said half an hour to workshop and
Okay.
discuss it, if you need it.
Yeah, we thought we had like 15 minutes, so that's perfect. Thank you. We'll be quick, we'll be quick. So I wanted to give a little bit history around City Spirit and where it started and what prompted equity work in the city of Lewiston and the city of Auburn. So this was sort of a collective work in both cities. Obviously before 2001, Lewiston, Auburn was primarily comprised of English, Irish, and French dissidents, and the influx of the French Canadians. And I'm going to pass on this presentation. I think, Megan, you have them. So if you can share with everybody, please. And so again, Lewiston and Auburn has seen in the last 20 years a lot of migration, particularly around the African immigrants, refugees. The largest refugee community in our city is Somalis, and Somalis do make up a huge number of the population here. One of the things that prompted us to come to Lewiston, prior to me coming to Lewiston, I lived in Atlanta, Georgia for about 8-9 years. And this is a small city, it's safe, you can raise children. My girls who graduated from here both went to Georgetown University and Strathmore College, and I've got 2 boys at Bates College right now. And so that's give us a lot of opportunities that we wouldn't otherwise have elsewhere. One thing that I cannot overlook though is the fact that this is a community that's not used to people who are Black and brown. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. There's a lot of accountability that needs to be done. There's also, when I came to the United States in 1993, my mother was a white woman, the woman who helped me drive. Her name is Lois Prest. She helped me drive. She taught me what to be, how to be a woman, what rights women have. She, ensured that as a girl, as a young person, that I had a right to my body. She mentored me and showed me what empowerment was. And so today, Lois is part of our family. So I've got a very blended family. Not only are we blended in skin color, but we're also blended in religion. Lois is Christian. She is a missionary person. Right now, Lois is in Tanzania, spreading Christianity. And so my work and where I come from is, coming from a place where people are human beings and they're treated as human beings. Having children go through this school system and we started in Old Orchard. I didn't come to Lewiston right away. I did start an organization here that's 20 years old that works for the rights of people, all people, women, men, and children. For 20 years, I joke about making the name of Lewiston look better, but that's really what I do every day. When my daughters started school in Old Orchard, because they were the only Black girls, the white kids stoned them. They would throw rocks at them. When my daughter got into Georgetown, she said, Mommy, I got into Georgetown without a teacher's recommendation letter, because the counselor did not think my daughter will get into Georgetown. He didn't think. And I said, I want to go rub it in his face. And she said, it's not needed. My daughter got into 11 different schools. Cornell, Johns Hopkins, and Georgetown were the top schools. When we went to Georgetown, sorry, Aisha, I didn't see this coming. When we went to Georgetown, It was the 50th anniversary day of Martin Luther King saying, "I have a dream." And my daughter's essay was the essay that was being read to the incoming class. We were inside Healy Hall. Healy Hall was built by slaves, and it overlooks at the White House. What I'm getting at is living in Lewiston as a Muslim when 9/11 just happened, as a Black person, as a woman, as immigrant, was not easy. It's still not easy today. Our children in this very school department do not perform at the level they're needed at. Their potential is not believed in every day. They come from poverty. They come from very traumatized background. They come from homes that don't have much, yet because they're courageous, resilient, and parents who've never stepped in a classroom, they still are proud to be the students of Lewiston schools. And therefore, when Donald Justice was killed, it was important for us to not sugarcoat racism and division that exists in our community. If we want a community that welcomes all, tolerates our difference, and let children have their chance in life in a fair way, we needed to look at equity. We needed to hold ourselves accountable. We needed to also not shy away from the opportunities we as a community have. Because when we hold ourselves accountable, when we believe and say we need to acknowledge that there's a room for us to grow, this fairness that we need to look at, the systemic racism that we need to look at. When we talk about those things in a way that, the way me and Lois talk about, because Lois will say, you know, in the Somali culture, we eat with our fingers. Yeah, do I have spoons and kitchenware? Absolutely. How many tables do we have in our house? A number of them. I've got a dining room table that has 10 chairs, but we still eat on the floor. Part of our culture. Culture is you. And she'll say, Fatuma, you've got a big plate, and that's what you guys are eating. Are you scared you don't know where your next meal is coming from? Is that what you're trying to do? I know that she is doing that because she's not educated from where I come from. And therefore, my mother, Lois, I have to tell her, Lois, come on. This is who we are. You've got to accept it. And so I look at equity, fairness, justice for all, making sure that our teachers in the classroom have the appropriate tools that they need to teach my child, because they did not come from that background. They did not. And so when we looked at what do we need to do, we needed to get together, and therefore City Spirit was born. City Spirit's mission is, we have a council. We've done a lot of work. Our first meeting was convened July 29th, 2018. We were very tensed. A few days before that, there was a fight that happened at Kennedy Park. It killed and murdered Donald Justice. We quickly responded. I remember going to his funeral. I remember bringing a lot of food. I remember running to a bank and getting money because we needed to pay with his, we needed to support his funeral services. All of that was to make sure and say to his family that we stand with you. At the end of the day, whether I'm Black, brown, or white, we are from this community and we must work together. And therefore, we brought together all kind of people. And there, City Spirit was born. City Spirit, the Spirit itself is an acronym. It's a national program from the federal government. It is a small service program within DOJ, Community Resource something, CRS. CRS is a program that goes into all kind of communities across the country to look at people who have tension because of race. And so when they saw the murder of Donald Justice, they came to us. They offered us their help, and therefore we did a City Spirit Day at Bates College on April 9th, 2019. 76 community members came together. We created the Lewiston Auburn City Spirit Council. Its mission is, City Spirit Council is a collaboration of city officials and community members committed to building awareness, leadership, and solutions to community concerns regarding social justice and equity from throughout Lewiston and Auburn communities. Most recently, the City Spirit Council has been engaged in the development of an equity statement for the city of Lewiston in order to provide a common foundation and a commitment to the healing of inequity and to provide space and opportunity for truly equitable approaches for all community members to flourish. This equity statement, which I have because I need to give her time, went through a lot of processes, was helped by MindBridge, which is a consultant agency that really helped us develop the equity statement. Thank you all. The City Council of Lewiston did adopt our equity statement, and today the City Spirit's equity statement is actually adopted by the City of Lewiston. And so it's there, and therefore with this work, with the work of the schools, we come to you tonight to ask us questions, to hear about the equity work that we've done collectively, and to urge you to vote on the school's equity statement. Yes, I need to read the equity statement. Thank you. Thank you. So this a little bit time, 3 more minutes. Thank you. Thank you. Is there anything else I forgot?
No, that's it.
Yeah. Thank you. Sometimes I get distracted with children and the mother, and I'm all over the place.
She's just gonna read.
Yes, I'm gonna just read. Is that okay? Yes. So the City Spirit Lewiston Auburn. We've got 5 core values. I'll quickly go through them. We've got compassionate, empathy, collaboration, accountability, diversity, and leadership. Those are the core values that we had to look at when we were creating the City Spirit equity statement. And then we had to define the equity statement itself. Equity is a condition where all cultures and identities are fully acknowledged, valued, celebrated, and empowered with a goal of community characterized by resilience, courage, joy, and wellness. This is achieved when a policy-making, service delivery, distribution of resources, and opportunities are accessible to all, and where community members acknowledge and account for the diverse histories, challenges, and needs of people within Lewiston communities, honoring our racial and ethnic identities, gender, abilities, religion, sexuality, status, or other dimensions of intersectionality. So the statement itself reads, the City of Lewiston is committed to equity. Through intentional, continuous reflection and action, the city and our community systems, including education, employment, healthcare, housing, law enforcement, business, and beyond are dedicated to address and dismantling systems of inequity while working together to build resilient and accessible communities where people of all cultures and identities can thrive. We acknowledge that without an intentional focus of equity, we will continue to perpetuate and deepen inequality, injustice, and harm. The city of Lewiston recognizes that those struggling with the impacts of systemic and persistent forms of discrimination, poverty, and lack of opportunity continue to be stigmatized, marginalized, and excluded from accessing institutions and quality services needed that promote health, safety, and well-being. Equity in the city of Lewiston requires a steadfast commitment to one another, and the cornerstone of the safeguarding equal opportunity is the ability to access resources, municipal services, and educational programs, regardless of identity, wealth, social standing. Equity is fair and inclusive for all members of our community. Thank you.
So thank you, Fatuma. So she's covered a lot. But it's important. I think being able to hear stories and tell our stories is important. So I appreciate you in advance for the time and for giving me the chance to give Fatuma time to tell you about City Spirit. I only got here, like I said, a year and 8 months ago or so. A lot of the work was already being done. I do have a presentation and I'll be talking from it. So if y'all can find it, that would be great. But if not, we'll go quickly. But with that, with my hire, it made sense for me to not only be involved in our school buildings, but involved with the community within the community. And that's what led me to being a part of City Spirit. But I had some milestone highlights about our collaborative efforts, just talking about some of the work that I've been doing up until this point. And I won't make it too extensive. That's why I made sure I had slides so that I'd stay on task. But it's really important that you know what I'm doing with our team so that I'm not dumping a year and a half of work on you as we're going through this process. Because like it's been said, there's a lot of work to do. I was glad to have a story to tell from our community because I won't be speaking from my own personal story. I'm speaking from the role of the SEL and Equity Resource Coordinator and all that we do. And so I'll start with those milestone highlights. So in spring and summer 2020, I was hired and I led our equity vision team. Like I said, we were already in the process of creating a vision for our school district. And luckily they had someone to step in and take the lead in those efforts. But with our working statement, yeah, I'm on the next slide. So you can see my pretty slide. So, right, there we go. But we're working on that statement. And during that time, we had to switch and shift to respond to the pandemic. Not only, like I said before previously, not just a medical pandemic, but we had a racial pandemic as well as an economic pandemic. And being that we're such a unique and diverse community, we were hit pretty extensively throughout. And so we had to pivot, but that made our work even more important. So during that time, I also joined City Spirit on behalf of LPS because while all that work is going on and we're all on Zoom, really, I didn't feel connected to the community. We had a couple of representatives from our school district at the time, but we did not have the two-way communication that we needed. Blame it on COVID, blame it on life, but Aisha had to step in. And so I did that and learned as much as I could while moving on to the fall, building infrastructures and defining what equity work really meant for our school district. So equity is a very broad word and it's defined in a lot of different ways, but we are Lewiston, right? And so what equity means to a Lewiston student doesn't mean the same thing to a student who lives in, say, the Bronx, where I'm from. So I had to make sure that I was assessing what those problems were, being objective about the things that we were talking about we needed to fix. During that time, I was also asked to chair the ad hoc committee on equity and diversity. with our mayor, and it was an eye-opening experience, but it fed into a lot of the work that we are doing and we're already doing on City Spirit, as well as in Lewiston Public Schools. Just highlighting some more work I did a lot of equity training in the community. I trained for Yale, the Yale School for Emotional Intelligence during that summer, the Boys and Girls Club. I've got the Adult Ed Teachers Hub. I've trained with them, talking about equity and SEL, with main initiatives for MLK Day last year, as well as the MDOE this year for talking about self-care and how SEL and all of that is connected, and next week with Maine Library. So we have been busy and just speeding on along into the winter. We were doing our City Spirit work, and I just felt the need to take on leadership because I was already involved. And with that, I also knew that we were working on our school's equity statement, and I didn't want that work to not only be washed out, but I didn't want that work to get lost in the sauce of what was being spoken about, because equity is huge, but educational equity is very distinct, and I wanted to make sure we were being represented during that time. So where are we? So we established our City Spirit equity statement, still doing all that beautiful work in our community and making sure that the work we're doing as a school district aligns with the work that we're doing in our city. So if you go to the next slide, that's our lovely statement. And before getting started, I just want to make sure that you understand that this statement fed into the statement of our Lewiston city statement. And as it was adopted, as we worked through that statement, of working with our equity resource team to develop the statement. And it has changed since the beginning of last year. We worked on it recently this year, and this is what is available to us. And it is an action statement. It is alive, and it is not something that's going to just live on our paper. So I'll read it for us, and then I'll go into that a little bit, and then we can talk about adopting it. Lewiston Public Schools is committed to building an educational community in which every member has access to the resources and opportunities needed to learn, grow, and thrive. We explicitly value and affirm the diverse voices, experiences, identities, and contributions of individuals of all races, sexual preferences, preference orientations, gender identities and expressions, religions, national origins, abilities, ethnicities, languages, immigration statuses, family compositions, backgrounds, and incomes. Through ongoing reflection and intentional actions, Lewiston Public Schools engages educators and learners in co-creating inclusive, equitable, anti-racist, and culturally responsive learning environments that serve to amplify marginalized voices and challenge systemic imbalances of power and privilege in our schools, our city, and our society. Next slide. So that sounds great. Y'all heard the city statement. It's huge. It's got all the definitions. It's got all the things. This one is a little bit shorter, but it's still something that you want to look at and really break down. And I thought it was important for us to do that. And in order to avoid performative equity work, it's important to start off with a focus view of equity regarding students and education. So equity work in schools is focused on systems change by rethinking policies, procedures, and structures, building equity infrastructures and permanent spaces for schools and our school district to address equity issues. So what that looks like for us is access to diverse professional learning communities, collecting and reviewing data with an equity lens, proportionate hiring and retention of educators, professional culture of continuous social and emotional learning, my favorite, anti-racist curriculum and instruction, school climate and acceptance of, a school's climate of acceptance and belonging, and discipline practices that seek to build and restore communities for all students. Go to the next slide, sir. So this is just to emphasize how we're doing things. This is how we're still doing it, and why that problem assessment is where City Spirit and our equity resource team kind of collide and collaborate. And right now we're on our plan and intervention. We've been planning all summer We've also been training and getting ready to implement all of the things that we're working on and all that work that we're planning to do. So what that looks like for us and what it has been looking like for us. But like I said, I've been here for like a year and 9 months and been working hard, and we haven't had the opportunity to really tell you what that looks like and what equity work looks like for our school districts. You can go to the next one. And so this is just a couple of slides to break down that equity statement, that action statement that you heard. So with LPS works to ensure access and to the resources and opportunities needed to learn, grow, and thrive by establishing infrastructure. So we have our equity resource team. That's a team of representatives throughout the school community working together to assess problems, plan interventions, offer feedback on the way we're implementing our equity work. And we're creating, we didn't create, these already exist as well. We have an attendance and engagement team, district data team, RTI team, and those are teams to review policies and protocols. We're identifying barriers and motivators related to student engagement and attendance in our current context, and we're sharing ideas to address those challenges. And our SEL team is more of a representative group of individuals throughout our school district as well, but they're leading to coordinate the social and emotional learning piece that feeds into our equity work. So I'd like to say, a quote, "The strategy doesn't just happen, people working in teams make it happen." And so that has been the biggest, I guess, accomplishment on my end personally, is creating those teams where we can not only have a problem or see a problem, but we can address it, and we have sustainable structures to make sure it happens. Thank you, Jake. So moving along, we value and affirm diverse voices, experiences, identities, and contributions by creating and maintaining spaces for and about marginalized community members. We're introducing our social justice standards for our curriculum instruction. I just trained our administrators and introduced those to our administrators, our building leaders, and directors of our programs. And we're aligning them with our social emotional learning competencies. So teachers have the tools they need to create learning spaces where students not only feel included, but their presence and their lived experiences are affirmed by what they see and what they're doing in class every day. And we also have our affinity groups, and we have our, our parent advisory groups, which I'm hoping we introduced last school year. I'm hoping to get a little bit more structure around those groups, speakers engaging in the diverse parents, BIPOC diverse parents group. I want to make sure that it's a structure that is advised, not only a place where Jake goes to talk to parents, but we're actually using those voices to inform changes. All right, and the next one, excuse me. And I've been doing a lot of talking over the past few weeks, so excuse me, I am losing my voice, but I'm gonna keep it real with you all. Thank you for your patience with my voice. So taking steps toward co-creating equitable, anti-racist, and culturally responsive learning environments. And I wanna just introduce what that looks like by saying all learning is social and emotional, and all learning is mediated by relationships that sit in a social, political, racialized context for all children, not just those who are Black and brown. Social emotional learning offers the possibility of acknowledging, addressing, and healing from ways that we've all been impacted by racism and systemic oppression, and to create inclusive, liberatory learning environments in which students of color and students living in poverty experience a sense of belonging, agency, and shape the context of and process of their learning. So our action statement is formatted to help us incorporate all of the district's efforts toward inclusive, equitable, anti-racist, culturally responsive learning, with a shared belief that our statement is too important to live exclusively on the paper document. So we're using our equity statement as a guide for our steps, and here's an update on what that looks like so far. Thank you. So our student information system service specialists and our student improvement coordinator are becoming close friends of mine in the office. so we can reflect on the statistics and all of the information that we're getting back from like our panorama surveys and all the information from how well we're doing at school with our coaches. We're able to go along with, we're able to get together and look at those with that equity lens, but not just myself, but I now have a small team to make that happen. Along with the teams, of course, that I talked about earlier. It's not just me, which makes me very happy because teamwork makes the dream work. Okay, and next slide. We're taking intentional actions, like I said. We've been intentional about our equity work. We completed the administrative training on August 9th and 10th. I think June 23rd was the first one. And we did that. It was entitled Leading for Equity in LPS, Standards for Equity, Diversity, and Belonging in the Classroom. Restorative practices is getting a reboot in the infrastructure for middle and high school. So we can see that the district, so we can see the district-wide impact that we've had with 4 years of restorative practices. So we're beefing up that infrastructure. So intentional actions. Anything I missed on there? I can ask questions after. And go ahead with the next one. And I'll say we're challenging systemic imbalances of power and privilege. This to me is a personal nod to Jake. I've noticed that he's seeking out and utilizing more equitable power structures and incorporating more of our stakeholders in decision-making process. So we're also creating more sustainable pathways for students to get engaged as well. Not just on the SEL team or the equity resource team, but in their schools with I think the Black Student Union, BSU, and they're beefing up student government to do more than just talk about the prom. So I think that's it. One more slide. So bottom line is we're shifting the narrative and we're questioning the status quo. So thank you for taking lead on that, Jake. We're educating our students and our educators to recognize and understand what we're talking about, what it means to be a culturally responsive, equitable learning environment, and give that experience to not just our students, but to teachers and all the people that are part of our community. I think that is it for me. So now it's time for questions.
You forgot to mention that City of Lewiston hired the equity person started today.
Oh, and the City of Lewiston hired an equity specialist today, which I'm happy to say that we worked hard to get someone there in that position. And I was a part of that interview process as well. And her first day is today. So we're just making excellent moves all over Lewiston. So that's it for me. Come on, girls, they might have questions.
I'll open up to the committee for any questions. Member Madris Collins.
So thank you so much for that presentation. That was incredible. Fatima, thank you for sharing your story. I am horrified to hear about the experience that your daughter had, but glad that she's at Georgetown, and she absolutely deserves that, and that's great. And her brothers, it sounds like, slacking off a little, going to my school, Bates, but you know, that's all right. That's what happens.
To stay close to me.
Oh, fair enough. I think it's so important that we adopt this tonight. We all know that our school system and our city more generally continues to struggle with the poison of systemic racism. And we as leaders have an obligation to root out racism and injustice wherever we find it, and to provide actively anti-racist education in line with the tenets in the statement and broadly accepted tenets in the literature today. So I guess I would not offer any questions, but just make a motion to adopt the statement as presented, and also to thank you both for all of the work on this.
Is there a second? Either one of you want to turn your mic on and say that you're seconding it?
Yes, I'll second it, and I'd also like to speak on.
Yes, please go ahead.
All right, thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, just first, thank you for the work that you've done. I know it's a different board here doing the same kind of speech, but thank you. It's very important work. So community's lucky to have you guys here working for us. And I know as a teacher myself, you want to see it really incorporated into the classroom, into the learning itself, kind of like technology was like, like when I was in elementary school in the late 90s, it was just walk to a computer lab and that was technology. Now it's very much a part of learning itself. And so looking at, equity issues, social emotional, learning itself is kind of incorporating it into learning itself is very important. And so the work that you guys are doing are going to allow, staff to be able to do that more and better. So you're giving them tools that they need. And so as a city councilor, now school committee member, I'm very appreciative of that. And I think it's very good. And so as a city as a whole, we're really moving forward with this, and I'm very happy to see the progress. So yes, I'm definitely in support of the motion moving forward with this. So thank you all for that. Thank you, Superintendent Langlis, for your work on this and keeping a focus on it. It does mean a great bit to a lot of people. And also thanks to yourself, Madam Chair, because you've been speaking about creating an equity statement since I've been first served on this board with you at the beginning of 2017. I think you were talking about it years before that too. So it's nice to see something like this kind of work over several years come to fruition. Seems to have been done exactly right. So thanks to everybody involved, and I look forward to voting in favor of it.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Ms. Hawkins?
I actually had somebody ask me at the PUG about this the other day. Well, what's the big deal with, why are we doing all this equity stuff? Everything's been fine for this long. And I said, do you think it hurts your student when they see another kid in class get treated differently because maybe their family doesn't have money or their skin is a different color? And they said, well, yeah, it's a little uncomfortable for them, but that's just life. And I said, what if they didn't have to be uncomfortable? What if they didn't have to think about their friend being excluded? Wouldn't they learn better? Wouldn't they be happier in school? That's what I love about this work, because while we're doing something to correct an injustice, we're helping everybody, maybe in ways they don't see immediately, but it's going to affect everyone in a positive way over the long run. So yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable for some people. That's what growth is. When we get comfortable, things stop changing, we stop growing. I think this is going to be some very good uncomfortable, and I'm excited to see where it goes. So I thank everybody who was involved in this. And I hope that people that are seeing this with maybe a little bit of a jaundiced eye, not really understanding what it is, would give it a chance and give it a chance to see where it goes and the great things that come out of it.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Are there any members of the public? Yes, there's a hand raised in the public comment.
Hi, can you hear me?
All set, yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, this is Linda Scott. I live in Ward
Oh, you're cutting in and out, Linda.
1. I hadn't intended on speaking. Whoops, I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes. We
Is
can
that
hear
any
you, but
better?
you're cutting in and out. I don't know if you have your camera on, but if you turn your camera off, your voice will probably stay more consistent.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I hadn't intended on speaking this evening, but I felt that having listened to Fatuma speak, it was important to say something. First off, I'd like to thank Fatuma for sharing her story. Honestly, I was really moved by it, and I thank you, Fatuma. I'd also like to thank both of you, Aisha and Fatuma, for the work that you have done for both the city and the school department. I watched many of the equity and diversity ad hoc committee meetings. I saw the work that you did, and I spoke very much in favor of it when it was presented to the city council and in support of it, and was very pleased that our city council voted for this. I believe in this statement so much and so strongly that as a member of the Charter Review Committee over this past summer, I actually wrote and advocated for a preamble to be added to our charter that includes this equitable and inclusive language. And I hope that our city council votes for our charter and this language gets included in our charter in the future. I encourage you all to vote for this. I am very pleased with this work. And as Fatuma said earlier, we are one community. We are all neighbors. We all live here. We all have to work together. We all live together. And this is exactly the direction our city should be going in. Thank you and bravo.
Thank you. Are there any other online attendees that would like to speak? Are there any members of the public that would like to speak that are here? Nope. Then we will go to a vote. Ward 5,
Yes.
6,
Yes.
7.
Yes.
City Council?
Yes.
Yes. Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4.
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0.
Thank you both. Agenda item number 7 is to adjourn. Do I have a
So
motion?
moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ward 5,
Yes.
6,
Yes.
7.
Yes.
City Council?
Yes.
Yes. Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4
Yes.
We are adjourned.
at 6:50.